Hello, I'm Robin Whalley, welcome to Lenscraft. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of my favourite subjects, which is printing. Now if I go back 15 years or so when I first started printing, I made a lot of mistakes. The prints didn't come out looking quite right, the printing wasn't consistent, but over time I built up quite a lot of knowledge about printing, soft proofing and how to use papers properly. And what I'm going to do today is share my 5-step process that I use for producing perfect prints every single time that I print something. Now this process can be applied whether you're using your own printer or you're sending your prints off to a print bureau. The process still needs to be applied and it's still the same other than hitting print at the end. Now we're also going to be using Lightroom for this, and that's because Lightroom makes things quite easy for printing. If you're using Photoshop, a lot of this information still applies, but how you go about soft proofing is slightly different. And if you want to know more about soft proofing in Photoshop and printing from Photoshop, see my book, Perfect Prints Every Time. I'll put the details actually in the information below so you can access this. Let's get on then to step 1, which is calibrate your monitor. Possibly the biggest source of problems when it comes to printing is monitors not being accurately calibrated. If your calibration's off in your monitor, you'll be looking at a screen while you're editing, you'll think the colours are right, you'll think the brightness is right, and you'll think the contrast is right. Yet all those things can be wrong just because the monitor's not correctly calibrated. When you come to print the image that you've produced, if it's printing correctly, all of a sudden it looks wrong. And the natural inclination is to trust your monitor because that's what you see, and so you blame the printer. And that's not often the case. So it's really important to get your monitor calibrated accurately. And I'm afraid there's no substitute here for spending a little bit of money on some hardware. On the screen at the moment I've got my solution for printing, and that's the Colour Monkey Photo. Now I don't recommend you use this because it's actually quite expensive. The reason it's so expensive is because it's used for producing paper profiles for printing as well as calibrating the monitor, and it can do a few other things. A cheaper option is actually the display version of the Colour Monkey, and you can use this to read in the brightness information, the contrast levels, and also the colour information of your monitor. It then produces an information file based on some adjustments that it will walk you through making. And that information file then is read by your computer's operating system, and it makes the colours appear accurate on the monitor. And importantly, it also makes your brightness and your contrast accurate as well, because that's possibly the biggest source of problems when it comes to printing. There's also another version of the colour monitors made by a different company, and this is the Datacolor Spider. And again, I've used Datacolor. These are relatively inexpensive when you weigh it up against the cost of the ink and paper that you're going to waste if you don't get the calibration right. If you're sending the prints off to a print bureau to get them printed, then this is also absolutely essential because you can easily burn through the cost of one of these calibration units just by getting it wrong. So the first step is get your monitor calibrated accurately. Let's now take a look at step 2. Now that we know our monitor's accurate and displaying the information correctly, we can actually start to adjust our image. All we're trying to do at this stage is make the image look the way we would like it to appear when it's printed, so just get it looking right on screen. You don't have to worry about anything else. Don't add any adjustments extra because you're adjusting or compensating for brightness or contrast. Forget all that, just make the image look right on screen. Now one tip I'm going to give you is if you look at the image at the moment on screen, you'll notice I've got a medium grey background. That's fine for things such as just general editing when you're going to be sharing images, but because we're going to be printing this, let's take a look instead against a white background. And as soon as we do that, we can see that the image perhaps isn't quite as bright and light as we'd like it to be. This is, after all, a snowy scene. All I'm going to do now is increase the exposure, and I'm going to also apply some whites into this, and you can see my histogram responding here. And now my image is much lighter and represents a snowy scene well. I can now switch back to the medium grey if I want to, and you can see now it does look better than it did previously. You can actually compare the previous image against the newly adjusted image using the option down here, and if you compare the two you can see the exposure was slightly underexposed in the original, and I can see that now that my monitor's correctly calibrated. Once you've got the image looking the way you want it to, we can move on to step 3 in the process. When it comes to selecting a photo paper to use, there's really only 2 things that you need to be able to decide on. The first one is the photo paper surface, and there's 3 surfaces really. You've got matte, gloss and semi-gloss or pearl finish, and each has its own characteristics, and we'll discuss those in a moment. The other thing that you need to be certain of is that you can get a paper profile for your printer so that when you print, all the colours come out correctly on the photo paper, and that's very important. At the moment I'm on the PhotoSpeed site, and they're one of the suppliers or manufacturers of papers that I really like. There's a couple and I'm going to share them with you in a minute, but PhotoSpeed produce excellent papers and they're actually very affordable. So let's go down the site here and we'll come to the papers, and rather than look at the fine art papers or the signature range, I'm actually just going to click on the straightforward photo papers. And that's because some of these are absolutely excellent quality and very good value, and they produce great results. So why not use them? Why spend 2 or 3 times the price on some pure cotton paper that perhaps you don't need for the bulk of your printing? Now when I come down here, you can actually see a lot of paper choice. One of the papers that I want to talk to you about first off is this Matte Ultra 240 paper. So it's a matte surface, which means it's not shiny, it's just like a paper surface. And when you print to it, you can produce absolutely great results. Now there are some characteristics of a matte paper that you need to be aware of. The first thing is image quality isn't as sharp as when you print to gloss, but because of that you can actually get away with a lower resolution image than if you were using something with gloss. So rather than printing at say maybe 360 dpi, you could get away with printing at 240. If you've got a small image that you want to print quite large, that's great because it means you can use a lower resolution image print and actually therefore make it bigger. The next thing to be aware of on matte papers is that the colours don't seem to be as dark and vibrant as with a gloss paper. Now when you put it behind glass, it looks fine, and also it takes a little bit more drying time than gloss paper to reach its real colour saturation. The final thing to be aware of is that the dynamic range of a matte paper is lower than gloss, so blacks for example will not appear as black and as deep and intense as if you put it side by side with a gloss paper. The next paper I want to actually talk to you about is, rather than gloss, because unless you have a very specific need for gloss paper, I'd recommend you don't use it, is the Photo Smooth Pearl 290 paper. So this is like a gloss paper, but the surface isn't as shiny and reflective. You don't get quite that level of reflection. But what you do get are characteristics similar to gloss papers in terms of how sharp and detailed the image can look. And the other thing is you've got a big dynamic range, so blacks appear quite deep and intense and colours can appear very saturated. Now both of those papers are very affordable and excellent papers, and today I'm going to be printing the image that you've been looking at on this Smooth Pearl 290 paper. Now the other thing we mentioned was the availability of colour profiles, and PhotoSpeed offer 2 types of profiling. You can download for free their generic printer profiles, so these are ones that have been made using other people's printers, and they may not match exactly to your printer's characteristics, but they're good enough. They'll get you 90% of the way there. But you can also get bespoke profiles direct from your printer, and this is a service that PhotoSpeed actually offer. So you can download their profiling pack and it talks you through how to actually get a profile made for your printer, but you have to have bought PhotoSpeed paper to use this, and it's a very good service, very fast and very accurate. Let's have a look at the profiles. So I'm using an Epson 3880 printer, and I'm also using Epson ink rather than photo speed ink, and it tells me here what the best settings are for that paper, and I can actually download the printer profile using one of these links here. So as I'm going to be using the Pearl, Photo Pearl Smooth Pearl, I can download the generic profile and install that now into my computer. Now it's very important that you use a profile for your printing, and we'll look at that when we come to soft proofing in a minute. So far in the process, we've calibrated our monitor, we've adjusted our print to get it to look the way we want it to, we've selected our paper, and we've installed the paper profile from the paper manufacturer. We're now ready to go into soft proofing. One of the easiest ways to soft proof an image is using Lightroom, and in the develop module you'll find this soft proofing option here. And once you check it, the first thing you'll notice is that we go to a white background because I've set it up to do that. The other thing that it gives you is this option here to create a proof copy. Now I'm going to use that and just click it, and now we're working on a virtual copy of the original image. If I just show you here, there's the virtual copy and there's the original image. And what that means is we're not adjusting our original image. At the moment, the image looks pretty much the way it did before. If we look at it side by side with the original, you can see the original and there's the proof copy. But the problem we've got at the moment is that that's not the way it'll look when it's printed. What we need to do is use this simulate paper and ink option here. Now as soon as you use that, your print will look worse, and it really depends what type of paper you're using or what type of profile you're using as to how it will make it look. At the moment this is set up for an Epson an Epson Stylus Pro 3880 using Epson archival matte paper. And if you look at it, it's slightly darker, it's not as contrasty, and it's also got a greeny tint to the paper. Now that's not the profile we're going to be using. We want the Pearl 290 paper that we've installed the profile for, and the way to change it is using this drop down here. And you can pick then from the installed profiles that you've got, but the thing is, not all of them will show. If you don't see the profile that you want, click Other. And that opens up all the profiles that are installed on the computer, and there's actually quite a lot on this one from various printers I've used in the past. The one that we want is this Photo Smooth Pearl 290 paper that we downloaded previously. And now the correct profiles installed. This is being shown with the paper and ink simulated, so we can see how it will look, and it looks a little bit too blue, and it also doesn't look quite contrasty enough. Now one of the things that you can do is change the rendering intent, and at the moment that's set up to perceptual, but you can also change it to relative, and that may improve it. So I don't know if you saw that, but when I switched from perceptual to relative, we saw a little bit more contrast in the image. So I'm going to use a relative rendering intent. The next thing I can do is adjust the exposure of my image to make it slightly brighter, and I'm also going to warm the image very slightly just to offset the blue color cast that we had. And I'm also going to push up the highlights just a little bit. And the other thing I can notice comparing the two, if you look, the mid-tone contrast or the clarity in there isn't quite as strong in the proof copy. So I'm just going to push that up very slightly until the two match. So what I'm trying to do here is make the proof copy with some adjustments look just like the current image that we had before. And because the proof copy is simulating the paper and ink, it means that when we print, it's going to look exactly like the image that we created at the start. And that's the step that a lot of people miss out when they actually do printing. So if you hear advice that's along the lines of push up the exposure to compensate for the darkening effect of the printing, that's all true, but it's not as accurate as soft proofing your own image. That's much better using the right printer profile. Now that we've got the two matched, we can move on to step 5, which is printing. We're now at the final stage in our printing process, and I've come over into the print module in Lightroom. At the moment you can see the original image here that we've got selected, and we've also got the proof copy that we created. Now you need to select the proof copy. As you can see, that's slightly lighter and it's been adjusted using the printer profile that we installed to make sure it's optimum and will print just like the original. The next thing you need to do is adjust the page settings. And here I've got this set to print at A4, but I want to make an A3 print. And I'm going to just switch to using a landscape mode. Now I can change my margins. Over on the right side you can see the adjustment settings, and here we're going to come down to this print job panel, and you've got the option to set it to either printer or JPEG. If you're going to be sending your images off to a print bureau, then set it to JPEG, and you can actually output the settings based on the recommendations from the print bureau in terms of any print sharpening and any resolution, and also the color space that you're using. But as I'm going to print this on my own printer, I'm going to switch now to that. I'm going to set the print resolution. So in the case of my printer, I'm using an Epson. The optimum print resolution for an Epson is 360. If you're using a Canon, then it's 300. The print sharpening I'm going to set to be standard. Now if I was using an image that didn't have a lot of detail, I'd set it to low. If I had something with exceptionally high detail and it needed a lot of sharpening, I'd set it to high. Just for a general image like this, I'm going to set it to standard. And what you have to do here is rely on the fact that Lightroom will work out the right level of sharpening to apply to your image based on the media and the print resolution that you've selected. In terms of media type, I've only got two options, matte and glossy. For the luster paper or the pearl paper that we're using, the correct option is glossy. At the moment, the colour management is set to be managed by the printer, and we don't want that. We want to send a profiled image into the printer, and we don't want the printer adjusting it. So what we have to do is change from the managed by printer to using this profile that we installed, the Photo Smooth Pearl profile, and we need to set this to relative because we did our adjustments based on the relative rendering intent. So everything's looking fine there. I now need to come into the printer options, and I'm going to select now the Epson Stylus Pro 3880 properties, and this is important because what you need to do is make sure that you don't leave the printer set up to automatically manage the image you're sending to it, because you've adjusted that and you've profiled it using a profile. What you don't want is then the printer to take over and adjust it further. So we're going to take this custom option here, and I'm now going to select from the options the off. So the printer will not apply any colour adjustment to the image it receives because Lightroom's already managed the colour for us. The other thing I'm going to set up is my speed, and I'm going to go to the quality options here, and I'm going to turn off high speed, and I'm going to leave the quality options set to 4, which gives a very good print with this image. So I'm happy with that, and now I'm ready to hit print on my dialog. Let's recap the process. Step 1. Calibrate your monitor so that you know the colours, contrast and brightness are correct. Step 2. Adjust your image to look exactly as you'd like it to be printed. Step 3. Select your paper, ensuring that you can get a paper profile for both the paper and printer combination you're using. Step 4. Use the profile to soft proof your image, making sure that it looks just like the original. And in step 5, print the image using the profile, ensuring that you disable any colour management within the printer. Do these steps and you'll be producing perfect prints every time. And don't forget, if you want to learn more, my book's available now on Amazon. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you have, please like it, please share it with others, and I'll see you in the next episode.